Welcome to today's class. Yeah, so last week we were able to look at a few things around what is Azure. We started our core architectural components of Azure, and we look at how to get started with creating an Azure account. Then we talked about the Azure physical infrastructure, Azure management infrastructure as well, things around um talking about region availability zones and how we can use availability zones in our applications. Talks about the region pair, then additional advantages of region pair. And then we look at some specialized sovereign region, the US government and China as a sovereign region that's a special Azure. Then under the management, Azure management infrastructure, we looked into Azure resources, resource groups. We looked into Azure subscriptions, how we can create Azure management groups, subscriptions, the relationship in terms of hierarchy between management group, subscriptions, and resource group. Then able to create an Azure with region availability sets as well. All right, so today we'll be jumping into the compute and networking. So for Azure generally, the compute, networking, and storage are the three most important components of Azure. Once you understand compute, understand networking, and also storage, then those are like the fundamentals of Azure because itself, those are like what you need for your infrastructure. So for today, we'll talk about compute and networking, the objective domain. We'll describe the benefits and usage of compute, including containers, instances, virtual machines, and functions. We'll describe virtual machines options, talking about the VM itself, the virtual machine skill set, the virtual machine availability skill set, and the Azure Virtual Desktop. We'll talk about the resources required for virtual machines and application hosting, including Azure Web Application containers and virtual machines. Then time permits, we look into virtual networking, the purpose of virtual networks, Azure virtual network subnets, peering, Azure DNS, VPN gateway, express routes, and public and private endpoints. So these are what is covered in this particular objective domain for the computer and networking.
Okay.
So what is Azure Compute Service? So Azure Compute is an on-demand service that provide computing resources such as disks, processor, memories, networking, and operating system. Now, if you remember, when you what makes your laptop today is because it has a disk. It could be an HDD or SSD where you store your data, your files, music, whatever, different data, right? Then it has a processor. It could be a Core i5, Core i3, Core i7, depending on the generation. Then it has a memory, which is the RAM. So the RAM could be from 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes. Then we have the networking component as well that enables you to be able to even use the computer to connect to internet because as this class is happening over the internet, so you are able to connect using a Microsoft Teams. You're able to I'm able to connect. We're able to connect to ourselves. The computer was able to connect to the internet, and from there we're able to use applications that enables us to communicate for this class and the operating system. So imagine I could remember there was a time I went to purchase a laptop for somebody, and the person said, I don't want a laptop with an operating system. So there's a name they used to call them at then. So free doors, that's what they call them. So without operating system. So the computer they just give it like that. So you have to be the one that will install your preferred operating system. Maybe you want it to be a Windows or a Linux or any other operating system, right? So without operating system, you cannot install any applications because the operating system is where the applications are actually sitting on. The Microsoft Teams we're using for this meeting is an application from Microsoft that was installed on the operating system that we are currently using for this meeting basically. So compute services generally must have those fundamentals, the disks, the processors, the memories, the networking, and as well as the operating system. Now, if you from this diagram, these are like the five basic compute services we have in Azure: the virtual machines, the app service, the container instances, Azure Kubernetes services, and Azure Virtual Desktop. So if you're going to look at compute services under Azure itself, these are the five things that we must take note of. Although there's Azure functions too somewhere where we will as we proceed. Now for the virtual machine itself is actually the infrastructure as a service. So if you remember, we have the platform as a service, the infrastructure as a service, and the software as a service. So under this compute resources, the virtual machines is an infrastructure as a service, whereas the app service, they are all these are platform as a service. Azure Virtual Desktop is also like a virtual machines too, which is also an infrastructure as a service. The Azure functions, the app services, the containers, they are all platform as a service. So in terms of management, if you remember our shared responsibility model, so for virtual machines, you have more control in terms of the configuration. You can say this is the type of operating system you want to run. This is the type of operating. So you have more control in terms of control and in terms of you are managing more things compared to the platform as a service. So with Azure Virtual Machines, you can create and use virtual machines in the cloud. So VM provides an infrastructure as a service in the form of a virtualized server, and it can be used in many ways. So just like your physical computer, you can customize all of the software running on your VM. And VMs are actually ideal choice when you need to do any of the following. First of all, you need to take a total control over the operating system. You don't want something to just be shipped to you. I remember that was actually the what the person was trying to achieve, the FreeDOS computer that the person sent me to buy at Ikeja then, because the person wants to have a control of the operating system. So I was guessing the person did want the one that will come preloaded with Windows. The person wants to use an Ubuntu, a Linux operating system on it, because Ubuntu is definitely free compared to Windows, except you are cracking it. The product key for Windows is almost 100 $200, to actually purchase the original product key from Microsoft. So the virtual machines give you total control over the operating system, and you have the ability to run custom softwares, right? Because it's like a computer. You can decide to run, allow applications, custom softwares, maybe a software that's you guys build internally in your organizations, or any software that you're actually testing for yourself, maybe as a software developer. For example, now you can run custom software that you build basically. And the third thing is that to use custom hosting configuration. So you don't want Microsoft to have done some configuration for you. You want the configuration to be done by yourself. So because virtual machines as infrastructure as a service has that flexibility, you have the flexibility in terms of management, in terms of configuration. You are able to configure it the way you want. So those are like VMs are those are the choices whenever you need a VM: the total control over the operating system, ability to run custom software, then to use a custom hosting configuration. And an Azure VM gives you the flexibility of virtualization without having to buy or maintain a physical hardware that runs the VM. So we don't need to buy the physical hardware. Those physical hardware are already somewhere in the Microsoft data center, well, the ones we looked at last week. So depending on the region you want to spin up the VM, so maybe you want, because of for the sake of latency, you want the VM to be very close to you, or you want it to be, maybe the users you want to deploy the VM for, they are in the United States or in the UK, you just deploy the VMs in that region for them, and they'll be able to use it without latency because that is actually their region. And you can even create or use already created image to rapidly provision a VM, right? No, you have to know that as an infrastructure as a service offering, which is the virtual machines, you still need to configure, update, and maintain software that runs on the VM, because you are that infrastructure as a service gives you that control, and you have to maintain all those things. You configure, you update, and maintain the software that runs on the virtual machine. So either you're using the Linux OS or the Windows OS, you have to keep on maintaining those things. And you can provision or you can create a VMs in minutes when you actually select a pre-configured image. So if you remember the last demo that we did when we are trying to create virtual machines, you had to go to the Azure Marketplace and look for like a pre-configured image. And an image is actually like a template you use to create VM, and may already include either an operating system and other softwares like either development tools or even a web hosting environment. So those are actually the options that are available for you when you're talking about VM. And in terms of scaling, if you remember benefits of cloud, the scalability, you can either run like a single virtual machines, right, for testing and development, or for minor tasks, maybe in your text environment. But if you get to your production environment, there are actually different things that you have to consider. But for a test environment, you can just spin up a single VM, for testing and development, or for any minor task that you want to do. Like these days, and because I wanted a test environment, I just spin up a single VM from my Azure to run some tests. When I was testing out on Windows 11, when it just came out, then I had to use it first as a virtual machines before I upgraded my host OS itself to Windows 11. I was on Windows 10 for a very long time. I had to spin up a virtual machine on Windows 11. Let me even see how they look and feel. And when I became comfortable with it, then because it's a test environment, that gave me a confidence to actually upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. And you can also create groups of VM together to provide those our benefits of Azure itself: high availability, scalability, and redundancies. And when you create multiple VMs, then you are looking at a production instance, because you don't want a situation whereby maybe one virtual machine is down and all your application that is hosted on the applications, everything is down. So you want to put in place the high availability, the scalability, the redundancy for the virtual machines. And Azure itself as an environment, it can actually manage the grouping of VMs for you to feature, such as we call them skill sets and availability sets. So those are the next things you'll be looking at under virtual machines. Let me confirm if this. So again, Azure Virtual Machines software, they emulate our physical computers. They include virtual processors, memories, storage, networking, and they provide total control and customization. So we have what we call VM skill sets, right? When we talk about virtual machine skill sets, what do we mean? So virtual machine skill set lets you create and manage a group of identical load balanced VMs. It helps you to actually, create and manage a group of identical and load balanced VMs. So if you simply create like multiple VMs with the same purpose, you need to ensure that they are all configured identically, and then set up networking routing parameters, to ensure efficiency. You also have to monitor the utilization to determine if you need to increase or decrease the number of VMs. If you remember, we when we check the option for the availability, the option for availability zone, the last VM we created, it actually created 3 VMs, right, for us. But they're like individual virtual machines that you have to monitor their utilization to determine if you need to increase or decrease the number of. But instead of doing that option, what VM skill says is coming to do is that Azure automates most of the work for you.
Okay.
Azure will automate most of the work for you for in terms of the virtual machine skill set. So the skill set allow you to centrally manage, configure, and update a large number of virtual machines in minutes. You know, it allows you to you have a point of that you can centrally manage everything. You can configure everything and you can update them. And the number of VM instance can automatically increase or decrease. When we talk about elasticity, in response to demand. If you remember, it's automatically because it's a virtual machine skill set. You have configured a monitor. Okay, once the resource utilization is more than 75%, it will automatically, that elasticity ability, it automatically increase or decrease in response to demand. And you can set it to scale based on the defined schedule. Maybe you already know that, okay, during Christmas, right, there's always an high pick up, maybe transactions, maybe on the applications that I use on the virtual machines. There are all these e-commerce applications, the likes of the Jumia, the Konga, and the likes. You know that during those period, festive period, there are a lot of transactions happening. So you can even configure it that, okay, around between December or between November and January, just increase. So you have defined a schedule that, okay, because you are expecting the volume of transactions to increase, you know, by that period. So that can be configured, or you can also, leave it automatically to increase or decrease in response to demand. And that actually save you cost as an organization because you're not over planning in terms of capacity planning for your workload. You're not over planning because the Azure infrastructure itself is monitoring everything that is happening in terms of demand. Okay, is understanding that the resource utilization is over 90%. Okay, it's time to scale up. It automatically scales up, add more resources, add more VMs that will help to balance, the traffic that will be coming in. And the virtual machine scalers also automatically deploy a load balancer to make sure that your resources are being used efficiently. That's another advantage. If you're deploying the other one, you have to create a load balancer yourself, right? But once you are deploying a virtual machine skill set, we're going to do this. You're going to see how it looks like. If you're deploying a virtual machine skill set, it's automatically deploy a load balancer to make sure that your resources are being used efficiently. And with virtual machine skill sets, you can build a large scale services for areas such as compute, talking about big data, even container workloads. Most organizations now, they are deploying application in containers, and those container workloads tend to sometimes, depending on the traffic, the volume of transactions. So that is one area that the virtual machine skill set helps you. Organizations that deal with big data that has maybe they have a lot of data coming in that they need to analyze and all that. So those organizations, virtual machine skill set is something that is very useful for them. So let's talk about the VM availability set. What is VM availability set?
Sorry, can you give me just 1 minute?
No
Somebody
worries.
is pressing my bell, so let me just go down and see the person.
No worries. It's
Or
fine.
maybe I have 1 minute.
All right.
Hello?
Hi, welcome back.
Yeah, yeah, I'm back. Yeah. Sorry
All
for
right, no
yeah.
worries, it's fine. Okay, let's continue our discussion. So, the VM availability sets, right? So for virtual machine availability sets is actually like another tool to help you to build more resilience, highly available environment. Now for availability sets, they are designed to ensure that VMs stagger, update, and they have very powered and network connectivity, preventing you from losing all your VMs with a single network or a power failure. Now, for availability sets to do this is by grouping VMs in two ways. The two ways is we either call them the update domain and the fault domain. I will explain that shortly. The update domain and the fault domain. Now, for the update domains groups VM that can be rebooted at the same time. This allows you to apply updates while knowing that only one update domain grouping will be offline at a time. Now, if you look at this, for example, now, this is update domain 1, update domain 2, update domain 3. Now, if you reboot this now, these two are not affected, right? Because that is the design for the update domain. So all the machines in one of the update domain will be updated, and an update group going through the update process is given like a 30 minutes time to recover before maintenance on the next update domain starts. So this, if you restart this, for example, now in terms of the update domain now, the other ones are given time until until this one is stabilized, 30 minutes, then the other ones are rebooted. Now, for the fourth domain grouping, it groups your VM by a common power source and network switch. By default, an availability set will split your VM across up to three different fault domain. So this is for domain 0, you start from 0, domain 1, and domain 2. So there are three fault domains that you have there. And this helps protect against a physical power or networking failure by having VMs in a different fault domains. So what it does at the in essence is so being connected to different power and networking resources. So that's what this VM availability set is doing, both updates domains and fault domain. So you connect this VM to different power and networking resources. Just imagine that all these now are connected to the same power and networking resources, and there's an issue, there's a fault in the power that they are connected to or in their networking. So automatically, it means that all the VMs will be down, and that resiliency is already affected, and the term high availability is no more actually possible
you.
because
Yeah,
their networking is faulting, their power is also faulting. So
yeah.
yeah. So best of all, there is no additional cost for configuring availability sets. That's the beauty of this. So you only pay for the VM instances that you create, just like the normal VM you create. So if you create a VM instance, that's the only thing you're paying for, even despite that you have availability sets configured. What are some of the various examples before we jump into the demo? Various examples when you use a VM. So some common examples or use case for a virtual machines include the first one during testing and development. Now, in my organization today, it is strange when I tell people, but that is actually what is happening. We have Azure, we have AWS, and we have our on-prem, but our production instance is on-prem. All our applications are hosted on, because we are running an hybrid and multi-cloud, right? All our production applications are running on our data center in the organization, right? But for testing and development, we have a Kubernetes, we have all our Azure VMs on the Azure. And what are we doing there? It's only for testing and development. So we test it, we spin up, we already know what we have on-prem. We spin up the same server, right? On Azure. So our DevOps guys, our software engineering guys, those that are part of developing the applications, maintaining it, and testing it, everybody have access to Azure. So that's what we do all the testing that we need to test. because we are just replicating our environment on premise on the cloud. So it is easier for us to test. So after testing, we just shift and lift it to our on-premise, right? So we're already sure that okay, we've tested, we've done the development, we've done the testing, everything is fine. So it's easier, and we are saving costs. Why? Because if you have to spin up all those same resources on premise, it's going to cost the organization more. But because we understand that on Azure, it's pay as you go, pay as you use, right? So VM provides a quick and easy way to create different operating system and application configuration. So the test and development personnel can easily delete the VM when they are no longer in there. So after the testing is done and we need to go live on production, they delete those things. So they stop paying for the virtual machines. That's one time. That's one advantage, one example or use case for a VM. Then when also running applications in the cloud, right? So the ability to run certain applications in the public cloud as opposed to creating a traditional infrastructure to run them can actually provide a substantial economic benefit. For example, an application might need to undo fluctuations in demand, shutting down VMs when you don't need them or quickly starting them up to meet a sudden increase in demand. So it means you pay only for the resources you use. So if there are instances that an organization needs to run applications in cloud, now today most of the fintech, especially in our region in Nigeria here, they run the application on the cloud. Why? Because it is cheaper for them than setting up traditional infrastructure. Because in terms of OPEX and CAPEX, they setting up that infrastructure and they're just see the likes of the OP, the likes of the Pampe. Pampe is actually Chinese, the likes of the OP and some other fintechs in Nigeria here. So it is easier for them to just spin up the application, it's already in the cloud. They don't need to worry about the underlining and infrastructures because what they needed is provided by the cloud service provider. The third use case is when you are extending your data center to the cloud. So an organization can actually extend the capabilities of its own on-premise network by creating virtual networks in Azure and adding VMs to the virtual networks. Right. So in case of our organization right now, we have Azure site-to-site connections because we have developers, we have DevOps guys in other region as an organization. So because of that, setting up our on-premise, creating an hybrid environment so that other developers working from other regions, they can collaborate easily compared to direct access to. So setting up that site-to-site VPN connections and all that, that's another use case, So what happen application like SharePoint, that can run on Azure VM instead of running locally, then this arrangement, it makes it easier or less expensive to deploy than on the on-premise environment. Talking about cost. Then the last but not the least in terms of use cases during disaster recovery. So as with running certain types of application in the cloud and extending an on-premises network to the cloud, you can get a significant cost saving, right, by utilizing an IaaS-based approach to disaster recovery. So if a primary data center fails, for example, now you can create VMs running on Azure to run your critical application, then shut them down when the primary data center becomes operational again. So during disaster recovery, maybe the data center for some reason there's an issue, you can easily, when you already have your backup, a DR, a backup somewhere. So it's easy for you to, eh, direct the traffic to that disaster recovery site, and your applications are up and run again until it gives you time to, fix what is happening on premises. Once you're able to fix it, then you're able to move it to the cloud.
Yeah.
I want to mention something about the move to the cloud with VMs as well before we go into this test, right? Now, VMs are also an excellent choice when you move from a physical server to the cloud. So we also call this process lift and shift, right? You can create an image of a physical server and host it within a VM with little or no changes. So just like your physical on-premises servers, and you must maintain the VM because you are responsible for maintaining, installing the OS. And so in terms of migration, if you have your data center, it's easy. So as you call it lift and shift, you can just carry, practically carry your virtual machines on-prem to the Azure without things happening, without things breaking. It's just as though you're moving it from one point to another. Then for VM resources, we need to mention this as well. When you provision a VM, right, you also have a chance to pick resources that are associated with that VM. Resources including the size. Size speaks to what is the purpose of the VM, the number of processor cores, and the amount of RAMs. Then storage as well. Storage speaks to the hard disk drive or the solid state drive. So either you're going for the HDD or the SSD, etc. Then the last part is the networking. So talking about the virtual networks, the public IP address, and the port configurations. So these are some of the resources that are actually being deployed by a VM, basically. All right,
Okay.
let's go to the Azure portal and see. 1 second. Let me bring up. Okay. All right. So I mentioned the last time that there are a couple of ways to deploy resources in Azure. Basically, there's a create a resource here. It's also present here, right? So even when you know the name of the resource you want to create, for example, you can type it here, but because I already have it here, you can just search for the resource here, virtual machines. So that's opened up the blade for you. And there's something I need to also mention. You can also, apart from the portal, I mentioned that you can create virtual machines using the Azure CLI. You can use the Azure CLI. You can use
That is CLI.
okay, this is the one I showed you, the cloud share itself, using the Azure cloud share.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So probably later time we'll go into that. Now this was our old virtual machines that were created. If I check the cost now, and that we're still going to deal with costing later. Now, if you click on this crate here, the drop down arrow, not the, now you have the option. We have Azure virtual machines. Then we have the Azure virtual machines with presets configuration. Then it tells you have more VM and related solutions. Let's click on this just to explore this. So it gives you other related things, more related to virtual machines itself. So these are like some advanced stuff for different use cases, right? But what I needed was to go to create virtual machines with presets configuration. So sometimes instead of just creating the virtual machines from ground up, you can actually choose a default. So what matches you? Okay, if you look at this now, this is a general purpose D series. So we have different series of virtual machines. You have the D series, the E series. So it's actually based on the CPU and the RAM size basically. Like if you check this D series here, this has two CPUs, so which is 7 GB, while this has four CPU, which is 14 GB. So it tells you other configuration, things that workload that each of them can run on. Like for example, now let me go to this dev. Okay, so it's the same thing it's bringing for me. So if you check the general purpose here, it tells you the type of workload, right? You have the enterprise applications, anything has to do with relational database and analytics. But for this E series now, it tells you the workload part because it's actually a high memory to core ratio optimized for heavy in-memory applications. So workloads around the SAP HANA, the SQL, Architect, and the other large in-memory workloads. That's for the E series. Then for the F series here, therefore high CPU to memory ratio optimized. So these are actually optimized for batch processing, web servers, gaming, and the likes. So any of them that you pick based on your workload. So these are like a predefined precepts that Microsoft has actually created for you. You can choose to create a VM by selecting any of those, or you can choose to skip the set. Skip the set. So for this, you have the option, like the way we did the last time. You have the option to select. I want to show you the. So if you check here, so we spoke about the last time we selected availability zone. If you remember the last virtual machine there. So we mentioned now in a session, we have the virtual machine skill sets and the availability set. Those are the two things we mentioned, right? Let's talk about the distributed VM across zones and fault domain at scale. Why this talk about automatic distribution of VMs across. So if I select this no infrastructure redundancy requirement, that means I'm saying that this is just like a test environment, right? This virtual machine I just want to use for a test environment. I'm not going to do much with it just for testing and development and this. But if I begin to, so under the availability option there, that's actually where you configure what you wanted, right? If you check this, so do I want availability zone? That's when this gives me, okay, which are the number of zones? You remember we selected 3 the last time, and this created the 3 virtual machines for us. And if you go to the with the option of virtual machine skill sets, what happened is that you have the option to create a new virtual machine skill set here. So this will actually redirect us to where we'll create a virtual machine skill set. So there are like 2 options. So this took us here. We could also from here search for virtual machine skill sets as well. So this is it here. We can choose. So if you are selecting a virtual machine skill set, it's also bring you to this point here. But a faster way, if you go to all resources, okay, you go to all resources. I'm sorry, all services. I mean, and under all services, we go to the compute services. We go to compute services here. We will see all the other compute services. So here is a virtual machines here. Why this is a virtual machine skill set here. And this is the availability set. Those 3 things we discussed. So we'll deploy a virtual machine for. So these are going to actually cost more. Why? Because it's deploying more than one, right? So let me click on create a virtual machine skill set here. So already, so it tells me, okay, which subscription. I told you without subscriptions, you can't do anything. You can choose to create a new resource group or pick from your any of your old resource group. But because I wanted to have a V, so I can now put the virtual machine skill set name here, just the same way we deploy our virtual machine.
Scaling can be done both vertical and horizontal, right?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The scaling, can it be both vertical and horizontal?
Yeah, scaling could be vertical or horizontal. So depending on what you want. Horizontal, if you need to add
I know.
additional
Yes,
virtual machines,
additional
yeah,
virtual
yeah.
machine.
Then vertical, if you need to increase the memory, the RAM, and all that,
Platform
yeah,
memory, yeah.
yeah. So even for virtual machine skill sets, you can I have different number of zones here. Let me just put two zones here. So for our zone pair, if you remember, so for the orchestration, so it tells you that a skill set has a skill set mode that define the attributes of virtual machine instance, the size, the number of these, as well as the number of instances the skill set changes. So the new instance are added based on the skill set mode. So for flexibility, it's achieve high availability as skill with identical or multiple virtual machines type. While for uniform, it's optimized for large scale states less workload with identical instance. So most of the times you can go with the flexibility. Then for security type, so you have different security level, the standard, the basics. So of course, you know that if you're using for production environment, you go with the trusted one. Then for in terms of scaling, so this is where you configure your elasticity, right? Do you want to manually update the capacity, to maintain a fixed amount of instance, or you want auto scaling? So this one you configure based on the CPU metric and say, okay, once the CPU utilization is over maybe 75% or 80%, or maybe you want to create a schedule that we spoke about. Okay, during the Christmas, the festive period, there's always a high volume of transaction coming in. So you can configure it. So you can select auto scaling. So because this will actually, we still have to go in here to configure everything you want, because by default here, it will show disabled, but we still have to configure it. If you say manual updates, that means you're the one going to do the manual work by creating, okay, I just want 2 instances, or I want 7 instances, you're the one that will determine that for the manual. But for the auto scaling, this will just check the CPU metrics, utilization of the resources. So this actually saves you, cost more, because when it doesn't scale out, or it doesn't scale up when everything is good below the stated what you've already configured. Select image, I can leave it as that. So run with, I just spot discounts, leave it as that. So the size, so we mentioned size. Let me click on show all sizes here, so we can see different size that are available. So we have the B series, we have the D series, this is series. So for our skill sets, these are different sizes that it brings for us. Size not available, insufficient data. So it's something that you can explore and you'll be able to see. So it tells you that these are actually general purpose. It tells you the number of CPU, gives you the RAM. So based on what you want, depending on the applications and the volume that you're expecting, right? So it gives you, you can select anyone. So let me leave it at the first one and select it. Okay. So here you configure the administrative account, just like when you want to sign into your computer, the accounts that you use to sign in, you can configure this here. So it's going to review the things that's, so even after deployment, you can still always go back to change the configuration. If you want to things, you see things around enable hibernation, it's configured to know the first domain counts, you can change it. I think it's currently deploying. So let's wait for it to deploy. It's running some final validations on it. So validation passed. So you can choose to any of these options here, right? I didn't select them because it just went straight. So you can actually go in back after you done creating the VM, right? And it's going to, you can enable anything you feel that you need to enable, like over provisioning. You want to log in with Microsoft Entra ID, right? So it's already deploying that for us. So while it's deploying, we can go ahead. sometimes it's good to, check stores that are being deployed. So you'll be able to see things that, so if you notice, the first thing that was the place was the virtual networks. Because for every a virtual machine cannot be created without a virtual networks. It must actually be linked to a virtual networks. So that's why that's the first thing that's, so with this to secure it, that's when there's the network security group is also now created. So those are the things that it's very important to take note. So let me leave it white. Let me go back to the slide. All right. So let's discuss Azure Virtual Desktop. This is also an important service, an important compute resource and service in Azure. Now, another type of virtual machines is the Azure Virtual Desktop. So what is Azure Virtual Desktop? It's actually like a desktop, an app, and an application virtualization service that runs on the cloud. It enables you to use cloud hosted version of Windows from any location. So Azure Virtual Desktop works across devices, operating system, and works with apps that you can use to access remote desktop and even modern browsers. Now, for some times, I work with Microsoft as a freelance consultant. Now, and as a freelance consultant, we use our own laptops, our device, BYOD, that's what we call it. So bring your own device. Now, we cannot, because of the sensitivity of the role that we cannot, we are not expected to have access to Microsoft customers' data on our personal system. And Microsoft cannot, because we are in over 150 country, different region, right? Microsoft cannot just start setting up laptops and be sending to different agents, the technical support guys, right? So what they had to do was to provision what we called AVD, which is the Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, what they do is this the Azure Virtual Desktop, it's like an application. I'll show you how the application look like. Let me see if I see how the application running. I want you to see it practically. Right. So we actually remote through the application. So this is the application here. So we download this remote application. So this was a computer that was provisioned for us, right? But I've actually removed the computer. This was like a test computer that I created. So this is actually like a Windows 365, call it cloud PC. So the Azure Virtual Desktop is like a cloud PC. So on this now, once I launch it, it will launch as though once I sign in with my username and password, it will launch as though I'm signing in into my own computer, but it is a cloud PC, right?
Okay.
It will run as if I'm signing into my computer, but it's a cloud PC. And on the PC, once I sign in, all the applications I needed to work are already installed for by the administrator for us. So I don't need to do anything. I don't need to, except maybe I find out that an application is missing. It has not been installed. I'll now reach out to the system admin. Okay, the tools team, we call them the tools team. Please, I have this issue. I'm trying to use the application, but it's not installed on my cloud PC or my Azure Virtual Desktop. Right. So from there, they will just from the back end, they will push in the application. I don't even need to know what they do. Even though I'm connected, they will push it. Just okay, restart the cloud PC. I restart. I'm inside again. I can see the applications, right? That I needed. So this cloud PC is one of the Azure Virtual Desktop. With the cloud PC, whether it is Windows 365 or not, they manage it using the Microsoft Intune. So it's a desktop and application virtualization service. It runs on the cloud. So just on my computer, I'll be signing it to be as though I'm using a laptop or computer provided by Microsoft to be able to work. And I cannot copy data, whether it's customer data, any file from that cloud PC to my personal PC. because they are security configured already. I cannot copy data like say I want to copy from my own system to the. So that's actually how secure the configuration was. There was a time there was like a kind of miss, but I needed to bring in the data, and before I find out that the thing has been blocked, I can't even sign in. I can't sign in my own personal Gmail here. I can't do anything personal. The only account that can be signed in here is that my Microsoft account that was provisioned by Microsoft. So it works across devices and operating system. So on my phone, on my tablet, I can actually, sign into it. So either I use a web version, or this is like the client version here. There's a web version. It's just like a web URL where I'll just go into and I'll be signing to the environment. But because we are expected to use a laptop, so that functionality was actually removed. So you can only sign in using a laptop. So with the remote desktop application, we just use it to remote into it and we are already inside the environment. So it creates a full desktop virtualization environment without having to run additional gateway servers. That is one beauty about this. Let me just let me take it out a bit. In my current role here, we have contractors. They are not full-time staff, right? We don't assign laptops to them. Rather, just the same way when I was working at Microsoft, um, they bring in their own device, but they want to access data in our organization. The story is, is very interesting. What we use here, we use what we call VMware Horizon. So VMware is one of the Horizon is one of the VMware products, right? So that product is actually used for VDI. VDI is virtual desktop infrastructure, right? But the number of servers, the number of servers that we have to deploy to have that environment running. I'm telling you, I want to tell you the beauty of Azure Virtual Desktop. We have the connection servers, we have the gateway servers, then we have the application servers. So because of that, it has multiple failure points. Sometimes the issue might be about around the gateway servers. They will not even be able to access the URL that will take them into the environment itself. Sometimes the issue might be connection servers, right? Sometimes the issue might be application servers. But for this Azure Virtual Desktop now, you don't have to run additional gateway servers in between. That's one beauty about it now. So once you assign it, there's something like gateway. No, the gateway server is actually the server that enables external party to connect, like a contractor to an organization, to connect to
Yeah.
that VDI infrastructure. So if that gateway server is having issue, there is no way they will connect. And that's like the first failure point. So if they even manage to get into the environment, if the gateway server is not having issue, they could have the connection servers too. That is also in between the gateway servers and the applications, right? So the beauty of this AVD is there's no additional gateway servers in between. So you just subscribe to it and you're good to go. And it reduces the risk of resource being left behind. So if you need to, maybe a user's contract has expired, for example, now, right? All we just need to do is to just turn off their access from the back end. They will not have access to any of our resources. So we are not leaving like if they are using their own personal device, for example, now we cannot remote and wipe all organization device. But because this AVD, we are the one assigning it to them. So all we just need to do is to block access, block login. Let me bring up the remote desktop again. So from the backend here, the user account that will provision to log into the PC, the cloud PC. Let's say this is the account. I'm waiting for the account to pop up. Let's say this is the user account, for example, now. From the backend, we just block this user account. So the user will not be able to sign in into the cloud PC. Why? Because the account that will provision has already been blocked. So there is nothing like the risk of leaving any resource behind, maybe the contractor going with organization's data and information. So this is another way of data and information protection. Then it has true multi-session deployments, right? through multi-session. You can actually be signing to this on this device. Just that they actually prevent it to be sure that that's one security measure that we consider too, because multiple can actually sign in on different devices. So that actually has to be blocked. There are some scenarios in which organizations allow it, and this multi-session deployment is actually something that actually help organization to work. Let me see what else. So in terms of security, like I mentioned, the Azure Virtual Desktop provide a centralized security management for users desktop with what we call the Microsoft Entra ID. It's something we're going to discuss. Microsoft Entra ID is a new name for Azure Active Directory. We'll discuss that briefly too. You can enable what we call the multi-factor authentication to secure user sign-in. So apart from using the username and password, you have to enable multi-factor authentication. We call it two-factor authentication, right? So with that two-factor authentication, they either need to sign in with using the Microsoft Authenticator app on their phone, or a code should be sent as a text message or via email as an additional layer of security, or even Microsoft can even call with the code. They will call you and they will provide you with a code. So that's additional layer of security. And you can also secure access to data by assigning a granular role-based access control to users. So if, like most of our users in our organization, I'm just going to use our VDI environment for example now. What we do is that this user is a contractor from from this company, from this organization. What are the application the user needs? So if it's just one application the user needs, that is the only application we're going to assign to the user. We're not going to assign more than that one application. So what this does is that this actually enhance the security. So we are ensuring that a granular role-based access control is actually, granted to the user. You only access the only application you need on the desktop. So if the only application you need is maybe a remote desktop, a calculator, or PuTTY for your SSH connections, that is the only application. Once you sign into the AVD, the only application you're going to see is that particular applications that you sign in. If this was still this is no longer connected, it was still connected. If I sign in here, maybe I only have access to like 5 applications, and those are like the 5 applications that I need to actually work. So, and I cannot install an application myself on it because I didn't provision it myself. So I can't say, okay, let me go to Google. I have access to Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, for example. Now, let me now go download this app. It cannot, it's not even, you're not even be able to download the application, not to talk of installing the application on the device. So the application that the users use are actually pushed from the backend, right, by the administrator. They are pushed from the backend by the administrator. And with the Azure Virtual Desktop again, the data and applications are actually separated from the local hardware. So the application, the data you're accessing, they are not on your own personal device. Rather, they are separated completely. So the actual desktop and apps are running on the cloud, meaning that the risk of confidential data being left on personal device is reduced. So because I'm not using my own personal device, I cannot even copy from the Azure Virtual Desktop environment to my own desktop. I cannot do that. So the risk of confidential data being left on personal devices is actually reduced. Additionally, user session are isolated in both single and multi-session environments. But in the case of when I was working Microsoft, you only have single session. You can only sign in on a particular machine. When you are changing your device, maybe your device got faulty, you have to request the administrator to remove your account from the backend to remove that your current machine from the backend so that you'll be able to sign into another machine, another device. Although they provide the capability of you doing it just to reduce work on the system administrator from the backend now. So they provide a place. So once you are trying to sign into another device and you have not signed out or remove it from the previous device, it's going to pop you an error that you are currently signing. You need to sign out before you can sign in. Now, another important thing which the Azure Virtual Desktop does is it helps you to use Windows 10 or Windows 11 enterprise multi-session. So only Windows client-based operating system that enables multiple concurrent users on a single VM. So with either Windows 10 or Windows 11. So it was even fantastic when Windows PC came out, right? When Microsoft introduced the cloud PC itself, called it CPC, right? Windows 11 was actually fantastic on it because it was running on instances of the Azure Virtual Desktop, and it provides a more consistent experience with broader application support compared to Windows Server-based operating system. So you have a better application experience because it's as though you're on your personal laptop. If you have used it before, there won't be difference if you're in your virtual desktop. And just like the way you have applications, so it enables you, maybe you have multi screens, for example. Now you want capability for multi screens. There was a time I was using 3 screens to work then because I needed to multitask and some stuff. I have the capability to change the number of screens I want, and I'm able to use multi screens on this environment. That's another important feature that Azure Virtual Desktop, provides. Do you have any questions so far?
Can you use the multi-screen on just one device?
So
Like
in
just on
this,
my laptop now, creating multiple screen on it
and no, you have to get
into
external monitors.
virtual. Okay.
You have to get external monitor, but you can divide your
Okay.
screen to have different applications. Maybe you are
Yes.
dealing with one application, but for multi-screen, you have to get
Okay.
external monitors so that you can be able
Okay.
to project. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So the next one we want to discuss is Azure Container Services. Azure Container Services. We're going to deploy most of these services maybe next week, although it's actually above the scope of our discussion. But I want to show you how some of them works. Now, why virtual machines are excellent way to reduce cost versus the investments that are necessary for physical hardware. Um, they are still limited to a single operating system per virtual machines. On a virtual machines, except you enable an hypervisor on a virtual machines, or you install a third party, maybe VMware, Oracle VMware, on the virtual machines. It is only one operating system you can have per VM. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's like
Uh,
I'm with you.
Yeah, or just like your laptop, for example, now you can only install one operating system, except
Operating.
you
Yes.
you do partition. Like on my laptop now, I have to partition. One partition for Windows, the other partition for Linux, where I'm learning Kali Linux for cybersecurity. So if I need to, the reason why I have to partition is because I can only install one operating system if I don't partition it. So the
Oh,
partitioning gave me like two. I'm just dividing my storage, my 512 SSD into 256, 256. So one partition for me to do anything that are Windows enabled, use my Windows applications. Why the other partition for Linux for my Kali Linux and Ubuntu? Sometimes I swap it, I reinstall, uninstall it and install Ubuntu. So that is one thing, limitation of virtual machines, because it's only one single operating system you can install. Now, if you want to run multiple instances of an application on a single host machine, containers are excellent choice. Now, the DevOps guys, this is what they do a lot. The DevOps engineer, they run on containers. They don't depend solely on virtual machines. They rather prefer a container because that single host machines, they can run multiple instances of applications. So what are containers? Containers are virtualization environments, much like running multiple virtual machines on a single physical host. You can run multiple containers on a single physical or virtual host. So the host can either be physical or virtual. So unlike your virtual machines, you don't manage the operating system for the container. The virtual machines appear to be an instance of an operating system that you can connect to or manage. Why for containers, on the other hand, they are lightweight and designed to be created, scale out, stop dynamically. So they provide lightweight virtualized environment that does not require operating system management and can respond to changes on demand. That's what containers does. So in terms of agility, right? In terms of agility, it is possible to create and deploy a virtual machines as application demands increases. But containers are lighter weight. They are more, in terms of more agile, they are more agile. Containers are designed to allow you to respond to changes on demand. So with containers, you can quickly restart if there is crash or hardware interruption. And one of the most important, one of the popular container ng, I don't know, you might have heard the word Docker, Docker. It's one of the
Yeah,
most
yeah,
popular container engine, Docker. So and there's an Azure support. So for Azure containers itself, instance, they are actually platform as a service offering that runs a container or a pod of containers in Azure. Why the Azure container apps, they are like it's also a platform as a service offering. They are like container instance that can load balance and they can scale. Why for the Azure Kubernetes service, they're like orchestration service for container with distributed architecture and a large volume of containers. Um, Again, for the container instance, they offer the fastest and the simplest way to run container in Azure. That's for the is ACI Azure Container Instance, right? So without having to manage any virtual machines or adopt any additional services. So for Azure Container Instance, so they like I said, they are like PaaS offerings, and they allow you to upload your containers, and then service will run the containers for you. So the application is already in a container. You can easily upload the container and services will run for you automatically. That's the work of the container instance. Why for the containers apps? They are actually similar in many ways to containers instance, right? They allow you to get up and running right away. They remove the container management piece because they are also PaaS offerings. The container application, they have extra benefits such as ability to incorporate the load balancing um, and scaling, unlike container instances. And the other functions allow you to be more elastic in your design. That's for the container application. Load balancing, scaling is available for the container apps. Why for the Azure container Kubernetes service is also a container orchestration service which manage the life cycles of containers. So when you're deploying a fleet of containers, for example, now the Azure Kubernetes service, we call it AKS, it can make the fleet of containers simpler and more efficient. So sometimes you have applications built in different containers. So when you have multiple Azure container applications, you can use the Azure Kubernetes service to orchestrate to manage the fleet of those containers. That's what Azure Container Service does basically. So in terms of usage, if you want to use containers in your solutions, they are often used to create solutions using what we call microservice architecture. And this architecture is where you break solution into smaller independent pieces. Like imagine, let me give Zenny Bank application, for example, as an example now. Now, there could be a possibility of that you're able to sign into the Zenith application, but you cannot transfer. Like on my Zenith Bank application now, we have the home button. I know we have the where you can buy a recharge card, you can transfer. I can't remember the other button. Now, those are like mini applications. The home button is in a container. The transfer, loading of recharge card. You want to
yeah,
top up your credit, you want to transfer
to the same bank, to third party bank, and the other part, maybe you want to make payments, maybe for my Go TV, my DSTV, right? Those four are different container. Let's say what is having an issue is transfer. You don't need to pull down the entire application and start troubleshooting because they are all in different containers. Just it's very easy to troubleshoot. You just look for the container. Where is the container that is responsible for transferring? And you focus there, you troubleshoot it. Okay, maybe you need to restart the service. It doesn't affect every other part of the application. I don't know if this is making
Yes, I
sense.
get it. I get it.
Yes. So that's how the container apps actually works. So you know that okay, this particular instance is responsible for this functionality of this application. This particular instance is responsible for this part of application. So in terms of microservice architecture now, the architecture, you break down the solution into smaller independent pieces. Like when you want to like split a website into a container, hosting your front end, another container hosting your back end, then another container hosting your storage, for example now. So the split allows you to separate portions of your application into logical sessions that can be maintained, scaled, even updated independently. So if you want to scale a part, maybe the front end, you want to just change the front end, the UI UX of the application, you just find out that you sign into the application today. Yesterday, a button was in a particular position, but the button has moved to another position. Yet the entire application is not down. Why? Because those applications in containers, they only updated the parts that needed an update. So the entire application is not affected. Now imagine your website, the backend has reached like capacity, but the front end and the storage are not being stressed. With containers, you could scale the backend separately to improve performance. If you're using the Azure virtual machine scale set, you have to scale the entire thing. But for containers, you're only scaling for the backend lane because it's a PaaS offering. It's not an IaaS offering. It's not infrastructure as a service. It's a platform as a service. You just scale that particular containers. No, you're not stressing the entire application. So you scale the backend separately, improve performance. And if something necessitates that you have to make a change, you can also choose to change the storage service or modify the front end without impacting any other component. So each component will be working as independent entity, basically. So that's it about the container services. Any questions so far?
No question yet.
All right, thank you so much. So the next is to talk about Azure functions. Azure functions. So what are Azure functions? So Azure functions, they're like an event driven. They are serverless compute option. They don't require maintaining virtual machines or container. Now, this is another level. There's a level for virtual machines. There's a level for container. Now, for Azure Functions is a serverless compute operations. Event-based code runs when you call without requiring server infrastructure during an inactive period. Let me explain what this means. Now, most of the times, if you build your application using VM or containers, these resources, they have to be running. If you actually host your application on virtual machines or on a container, and you want the applications to be accessible, that means either the virtual machines or the container must continue running for your applications to function. But with Azure Function, an event wakes the function. Maybe somebody wants to transfer
An event what?
that,
Sorry.
it wakes the function. The function is by default is sleeping. There is what called an inactive period where the function is not doing anything. And remember, for Azure, you pay as you use. So like when somebody is not making transfer, for example, now, I'm just going to use bank application, for example, now. I have my application downloaded, installed. I'm not doing transfer. Let's say nobody is doing transfer. The function that is responsible for that transfer operation is sleeping at that period. Microsoft is not charging me for it. It's until when I click transfer. So the function wakes up that, oh, this person wants to transfer and start running. So it's actually like a serverless compute operation. It doesn't require server. So it's actually alleviating the need to keep resource provision when there is no event. It's only when an event wants to happen that Azure Functions actually happens. When there's no event, the function is sleeping. It's an inactive period. So you are saving more for that period that the function is not happening. So it's like you are calling a code to run. Until you call that code to run, the code is sleeping. That's how function works. Is actually serverless computing in Azure. We call it serverless computing. You don't require servers for it to actually work. Like for example, now some benefits of Azure functions. So when you use Azure functions, you use it in a situation when you are only concerned about the code running your service. What is running the event? When it's an event-based code, that's what it's called, event-based code. So you are concerned about the code running your service and not about the underlying platform or the infrastructure. So functions are commonly used when you need to perform work in response to an event. Is often based on maybe this REST request, R-E-S-T, REST API. I don't know if you heard the word REST API before. So when there's a REST request or a timer or message from another Azure service. So there must either be a message from, there must be a call, something that is calling it, like either a REST API or a timer or message from another Azure service. And when the work is completed, maybe the code has complete running, what happened is that within seconds it's done running and it goes back to an inactive state again. And for function, it also works with the principle of auto scaling too, because function scales automatically based on demand. If 100 people are making transfer today using the bank application, for example, now the function that needs to run, the code that needs to run for that transfer to work will be running, and it automatically scales when the number of transfer. Just imagine during the festive period that we need to give our age parents something for the festival. We need to send them money. We need to send our loved ones money. Maybe we could not send a gift to them. We want to support them to be for them to be maybe people in the village to enjoy the Christmas, for example. Now, a lot of people are doing transfer. So a lot of functions need to run, right? So the function will automatically scale too. So that because of the number of transactions that is happening, and I don't know, you've left Nigeria, there was a period when there was cashless policy going to be implemented, and cash was scarce everywhere. Even in bank, you go to a bank, so people are doing transfer that period. So functions automatically, scale up. Why? Because a lot of stuffs, a lot of transfers are happening. So for Azure Functions, it runs your code when it is triggered, and it automatically deallocates resources when the function is finished. As soon as the transfer is completed, automatically it deallocates. So you're not paying for virtual machines running 24 hours. You're not paying for containers running, because it's just a function to run, and the function, deallocates the resource. So most times in the model with Azure Functions, right, you're only charged for the CPU time while your function runs. Are you seeing how this will help organizations to actually save cost now?
Save cost,
Because
yes.
it's
Yes.
only the CPU time, the CPU that needs to the resource to run that function, that code. Once that thing is done running, so most times you see that people are paying maybe 0.01 cents, because the function just run within seconds and you're done. It's within seconds or less. And function can either be stateless or stateful. Let me explain that. When they're stateless, the stateless is actually like the default. They behave as if they are restarted every time they respond to an event. So just like you're restarting your server or you're restarting your VM, or you're restarting your container. So it's when there is an event, it looks as if they are restarting, and they take within seconds. For the stateful one, that's that we'll call those one the durable function. Is a context is passed through the function to track the priority activity. So for that stateful, that one is tracking what are the priority activities that need to happen. But for the stateless, which is like default, it's behave as if they need to restart every time they want to respond to an event. And functions are like a key component in serverless computing. They are also a general computing platform for running any type of codes. So if you need, if the need of the developer, apps change, you can deploy in a project environment that isn't the serverless. But this flexibility allows you to manage scaling, run on virtual networks, even completely isolate the function. So functions are like a key component in when talk about serverless computing in Azure. So it's not every time you want to deploy a server to run your application. Sometimes you need a serverless computing, and Azure Function is a PaaS offering that supports that serverless compute operations. Any questions so far? Have any question?
No, no question.
All right. So let's compare virtual machines, virtual desktop, and containers. Let's see what are the difference before we jump into the next topic. Now, for virtual machines, is a cloud-based server that supports either Windows or Linux environment. You have to take note of that. Is either Windows or Linux environments. There is no, as at this time, there is no environment for Mac yet, but for Windows and Linux environment, or virtual machines support it. Why for virtual desktop? It provide a cloud-based personal computer Windows experience. So for AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, there is nothing like Linux or Mac. So it's only Windows. So it's either it is Windows 10 or Windows 11. So it's like a personal computer experience. The way you are in your computer, that's where that experience is. There's no difference. The way is you sign into your own computer, that's the look and feel of how the AVD looks like. Then for containers are lightweight miniature environment well suited for running microservices. So like the analogy of the application I gave, the part of the front end, transfer, paying a bill, loading the charge card, having this, they have different environments. Now for virtual machines, they are useful for lift and shift migration to the cloud. Let's say on your on-prem environment, you have some virtual machines, some applications. You felt like, oh, the cost of running this our on-prem infrastructure is much, the cooling system, running generator 24 hours and all that. It is very easy for you to just lift and shift and move to cloud with virtual machines. Why for virtual desktop is a dedicated application to connect and use, or is accessible from any modern browser. So apart from the application I show you, the remote desktop where you can use to connect to the virtual desktop is actually a cloud-based. It's a cloud-based. You can on any modern browser, maybe Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome, you can actually connect to the virtual desktop, and it will be as if you're in your computer. For containers, they are designed for scalability and resiliency through orchestration. So we are focused on scalability of our applications to be available for orchestrations. Then the last on virtual machines, so they are like is a complete operating system package because it includes the host operating system. You install the OS yourself. While for the virtual desktop is a multi-client login, allow multiple users to log into the same machine at the same time. So different users can log into the same machine. Let's say organizations that run customer service, for example, now they run different shifts. For example, now the morning, the afternoon, and the evenings. You want the morning guy are done. A user in the afternoon shift can use their own credential to log into the same machine. A user working in the evening shift can also use the same machine. So it's a multi-client login. It's allowed for multiple users. For containers, focuses on applications and services are packaged in a container and they sit on top of the most host operating system. So multiple containers can sit on one host. So those are majorly for applications and for hosting applications instead of spinning up multiple virtual machines to host different applications. You can just, provision container instances, and those container instances, you can have multiple of them on a single host operating system, and you're able to, you know, differentiate different parts of your applications. So for easy troubleshooting in case there are issues in the future. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's move on to Azure App Service. So we've mentioned that containers are used with our applications. So what is Azure App Service? Now, apart from hosting applications on containers, hosting on virtual machines, on and also using the Azure functions for applications. If you need to host your application on Azure, you might initially turn to a virtual machines or containers. So most people before now, they feel like the best place to host application is virtual machines or containers. So both VMs and containers, they provide excellent hosting solutions. Why? Because VM gives you a maximum control of the hosting environment and allow you to configure it exactly how you want it. So VMs also may be the most familiar hosting method if you're actually new to cloud. So a lot of people that are new to cloud, they host more on VM. While container, on the other hand, with the ability to isolate and individually manage different aspects of the hosting solution or the application, can also be a robust and compelling option. Because, but there are other stuffs that we can also, deploy on Azure. That's one of the beauty of Azure, and one of them is the Azure App Service. What is Azure App Service? So Azure App Service is a fully managed platform to build, deploy, and scale web applications and API quickly. Note that web applications and API. So what is doing in the backend? It's enabling you to build and host web application, even background jobs, even mobile backend. So for mobile applications that for their backend, you can host them on Azure Web Apps and even the RESTful APIs in the programming language of your choice without managing the underlying infrastructure. So it offers the same thing. We are interested in benefits of cloud, scalability and high availability. So App Service supports Windows and Linux. It enables automated deployments either from GitHub, even from Azure DevOps, or any Git repo to support continuous deployment model. And for Azure App Service, is actually robust in hosting option, and that you can use to host your application in Azure. And it lets you to focus on building and maintaining your application. And Azure focuses on keeping the environment up and running. It focuses on keeping the environment up and running, right? For Azure App Service too, is also an HTTP based service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and even the mobile backend. It supports multiple languages like the .NET, the .NET Core, the Node.js, Java, Ruby, Python, PHP. So it supports multiple languages, and it also supports both Windows and Linux environments. So it's just like the Azure functions and the others apart from the Azure virtual machines. Is also a PaaS offering with enterprise grade performance, security, and compliance requirement. So Azure Function is actually, there are different types actually for Azure Functions. There are different types of Azure Functions. Like we have with app service. I mean, there are different type of app service rather. There are, with app service you can host most common application service like you have the web app itself where you have the web application. We have the API apps that you can also be hosted to. We have the web jobs too, and we have the mobile apps that also can also be hosted on the app service. Most times, what app service does is that it handles most of the infrastructure decisions you deal with in hosting web accessible applications. Like most times they like Microsoft provides subscription to to even purchase what we call the app service domain. That means you can even purchase a domain for your app service. And once you purchase a domain for the app service domain, you can even use that to host your application directly on Azure without needing to, maybe you're looking for either a third party domain registrar to start buying the domain from. With Azure, that option is available for you. Now for app service, it handles deployments and management. Both deployments and management, they are integrated into one platform. The deployment environment where you're deploying the applications, and also the management environment where you manage the application after the deployment. You know, if a team is developing an application, once the application go lives, another team needs to manage how the applications works. So the app service offer those two functionalities, both deployment and management. It also offer what we call the endpoints. Endpoints are secure. You can actually secure the endpoints using the Azure App Service, and sites can be scaled quickly to handle high traffic load. So if you have a website that is hosted on Azure App Service, for example, now, and there's a time for maybe for e-commerce platform, for example, now during high volume transactions when people are making a lot of purchase, maybe there's a discount sales and all that, you can easily scale it to handle high traffic load. Then there's a built-in load balancing and traffic manager to provide our availability. So that's one important of this Azure App Service, because of that built-in load balancing. So once there is a high traffic, the load balancing and the traffic manager, they are providing high availability that to manage how the traffic will be directed. So for all of the app styles, be it the mobile apps, the web apps, the API apps, for example, now they are hosted in the same infrastructure, and they all share this benefit: deployment management, endpoint security, sites scale quickly, and also building a built-in load balancing and traffic manager. So this flexibility makes app service the ideal choice to host any web oriented applications. So once there's a project to host a web oriented application, one of the things I suggest to people is to
App
go
service.
with the app service. And under a different type for the web apps, for example, now, so the app service include a full support for hosting web applications, either using ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core, even Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, even Python. So you can either choose, okay, I want Windows as my hosting operating system, or Linux. So you have that flexibility. So if you're a Windows guy, the web apps or the app service part that is responsible for creating web application, you can choose between, okay, let me use Windows or let me use Linux for this application. And for API applications, much like hosting a website, you can build a REST-based web APIs by using your choice of language. So for developers, so they have different language and frameworks, and you can get like a full Swagger support and the ability to package and publish your API in the Azure marketplace. So because you're even building this on Azure, it's very easy for you to publish the API in the Azure marketplace for people to, people can, get the API there. And the produced apps can be consumed from any either HTTP or the HTTPS based clients. So any HTTP or HTTP, they can consume your API apps once they are built and they are published on the Azure marketplace. For the web jobs, you use the web jobs feature to run program. So program like any .exe file, Java, PHP, Python, or even Node.js, or even scripts like the .cmd, .bat, even PowerShell, even Batch. So anything like that. In the same context with the web APIs, the API application or a mobile app, they can actually be scheduled or run by triggers. So those web jobs are often used to run background tasks as part of your application logic. And coming to the mobile application part, so you use the mobile application feature of the app service to quickly build like the backend for iOS or Android applications. So it's because the app service is actually designed to build a backend. So those backend for both your iOS and Android application, you can develop them. You can also manage them because it gives you the interface for both development and management. So with just a few actions in Azure Portal, you can either first, you can store your mobile application data in a cloud-based SQL database. So Azure has the Azure SQL, even the Azure Managed SQL, the managed instance for SQL. You can store all your data in SQL database. Maybe you want all your data to be stored in the SQL database. And also you can authenticate because of the Microsoft Entra ID feature, that's formerly known as the Azure Active Directory. You can authenticate customer against common social providers. So maybe you want your customer to sign in using their Google accounts, their Twitter accounts, even their Facebook accounts. So that mobile app functionality of the Azure web apps provide that functionalities for you. And you can also send maybe push notifications. Maybe users have downloaded the applications. You want to be able to push notifications to users. Okay, maybe for instance, the Jumia mobile app, for example, now let's say it's also stayed on Azure. You can push notifications to your user. Okay, this particular item is available on discount price and all that. You can be notifying your users about features, functionalities, even updates about your products. And you can also execute backend logic in either using C Sharp or Node.js. So if you want to execute some custom backend logic, C Sharp and Node.js give you that functionality to be able to execute those backend logic. And for the mobile app size, there's actually an SDK support for native iOS or Android. Even the Xamarin, even the React Native application, there is actually the SDK support for those things. So if you are trying to build the front end of the iOS, the Android, or even the Xamarin, you're trying to use the React Native to build those front end, there's an SDK support basically. Any questions so far? Any question?
No question. No question.
All right. Let's jump into the portal shortly. We're running up there. So that's actually like the end of our compute services. So we have this done already. We have this done already. So if you click on go to resources, so it shows you. So once your virtual machine skill set is deployed, so automatically it actually starts it for you. So you can have the option to restart it. If you don't want it to consume your money, maybe you want to deallocate it, you have the option to stop it. Now, this hibernate is actually greater because at the point of configuration, we didn't enable it. That's why it's greener. That's why it's saying hibernate
Yeah.
is not enabled. So you have the option to even hibernate it. If you want to re-image this, you have the option to re-image it. If you're done with it, we don't need it. We can delete it. Can delete it, or the virtualizing skill set is not working very well. You have the option to actually, refresh it here. So you won't see if you come under networking, though we'll discuss this more under networking. You see the load balancing options that are available. So you can see here, you have this load balance that was configured, that was deployed automatically for us. And you can even choose to add additional load balancing here. You can add existing load balancing, or you can create a new load balancing for here. So under networking, by the time we discuss networking, we'll talk about that. And let me talk about, so the overview here gives general overview of the virtual machine skill sets. Talk about the resource group where the virtual machine skill set is, the location it was deployed to, its US, the zone it was deployed in the location, then the subscriptions itself, subscriptions ID. So the size is here, tells you the size. What is the current operating system? You'll be able to see it. Then for the orchestration mode, it's flexible. That was actually what we selected. So you can see that the property here, this was a combination that shows that is disabled for us here. So in terms of availability and scaling, it tells you you have two availability zone. Then the number of instance counts is 2. Then for the scaling option, auto scaling, yes, there. Then for fourth domain count, you have that there. Then for source image detail, it tells you the Windows Server 2016 data center. It gives you the size here, the RAM, the CPU, and the size is there as well. Then other management, we didn't enable most of this stuff, but both diagnosis is actually enable, and our upgrade policy is manual. Then for else, we didn't enable anything, but you have the option once you click on it. Actually, so you have the option to actually enable it. So anything you didn't do before, even after deploying, you can, you can do it, later. So I'm not going to do that right now. Then under activity logs. So for this, currently there is nothing that this will show, but it basically shows you the things that is happening. Like for this now, we have an audit policy action. So we'll be able to trace this to the subscription. So something has been configured on the subscription, and this was initiated by. So the activity log basically tells you what are the activities that happen on the virtual machines, right? And probably in the future, these are actually associated stuffs. When we talk about the log analytics, you can connect the log analytics to get more logs, more details, basically. And for this, you can export your activity logs. You can also download as a CSV. So it's like an Excel format. You can download to review all activities happen. Maybe something happened to the virtual machine is shut down. You're trying to troubleshoot. The activity log here can give you more details about it. Then for access control, yeah, so we'll talk more about this, but then we'll talk about subscription. So access control, it happens for both subscriptions and resources. It's actually where you grant users access. So maybe I wanted to grant, after deploying this virtual machine skill set, for example, now I want to grant a user in my organization access, to the virtual machine skill set. I can just add a role. So what it means is that if I grant the user access, the user will also be able, like now this VM, I'm the only person that will be able to see it in my organization. But maybe I have other users I'm collaborating with, I want to give them access. So I can just go to the privileged administrator role, then give them contributor access. Contributor, this owner access means they can do everything I can do, including granting others access. But the next role after the owner role is a contributor role. By the time we discuss RBAC, role-based access control, we'll talk more about it. This contributor access means they can do everything I can do except granting somebody else access. You understand? They cannot assign what I'm doing here to somebody else, but they can do every other thing I can do. That's what it means. Then if I wanted them to have a user access administrator, like user admin and all that, so different roles. So if I grant them contributor role, I can just click on next here. I'll select the user. I'm sure I don't have any user here because I'm the only user in this tenant. Oh, I have some external users have access here. Okay, so let's say I want to grant this other user account access. So they're all guests. For example, select, then review and assign. So what it means is that once this user that granted access sign into this my directory here, they will also see this virtual machine skill set. and they'll also be able to launch it. If they have the credential, they'll be able to sign into it. So one of the best practices is to join the virtual machine skill sets to the Entra ID so that users can sign in with their own user account, basically. Then if you want to review settings under the digs, so you'll be able to see the dig settings, the OS, image preference, so the premium SSD, and the size maximum. So gives you some of the information about the digs. Do you have any extension on operations? I'm not sure we do. Operating system. So this should tell us the kind of OS that is installed, which is this is the image of the OS. So if you want to review, so this is like the management part of the VM itself. You can check some settings, you can things I've configured before. You feel that this is not happening. Okay, this is currently disabled. Okay, let me say, okay, forecast only or enable, right? So depending on the use case for the organization, you'll be able to do that. All right, let me go to all services. So compute service. So we spoke about Azure Virtual Desktop. Let's see if we can provision one. So we click on that. So most of this might actually take time because first of all, it has to do a lot of things. So we'll do another session where we'll do, because you have to actually create an old spool. From the old spool, you have to create a lot of things. Then before when I get to granting users access, this might take time, but just let's just go an overview. If you create an old spool, for example, now select. So it's good to select, you create a new resource for it. So you know that it's for the Azure Virtual Desktop and everything will be stored there. Then the location, then the app type. So once to be a desktop app or remote app, the host type. So personal or pool. So for personal, one person, the pool, multi-users there. So once you create an op, you'll be able to create a virtual machines under it. You want to add virtual machines, be able to add it. I'm not sure my subscription will be able to do that because it's just a test subscriptions. Then which other one did we discuss? App service, virtual machine skill sets. So for app service, to give us different options, you want to create a web application, a static applications, web app plus database, WordPress on web apps. So we'll be able to create one of this one in the next class. So they are usually the same place, the same steps. So most times, one of the things that's important is this app name. Let me call it house first. So this is like a global name. So it has to be like a unique name. It's just like a website. And put this. Okay, so it's accept that. So if I'm going to go into the application, it's going to be this dot Azure website.net. So eventually, I can now if I have my own domain that I bought that is a .com or .uk, I can now use it to map it. So there are a lot of stuff we'll check here, although they are actually above fundamentals level, but just for to show you around the Azure portal itself. All right. I mean, that's everything about compute basically. So if you go in, you can just explore them since you have your subscriptions. So once you go into
Yeah.
all services under the category, click on compute. So you see all the compute here. So this all these ones are under the infrastructure as a service. They're under infrastructure as a service. While these are the platform as a service,
For my family.
like then the serverless and the microservice. So we'll talk about the function apps, container apps environments, container apps and Kubernetes services. Then these are
under high performing computing, which is actually not most are actually in preview anyway. Then talking about the hybrid cloud, in case you have an on-premise or Citrix applications, or third-party applications, you have this. So you can just come to compute, you play around each of them, creating the container apps instances and all that. So they're always pretty straightforward. Once you hit a stop like a block road, you'll be able to, get recommendation what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong. You'll be able to do that. So next class, we might even start with creating some of these resources afresh. I'll need to activate another subscriptions for that. So create some of the resources and see. And you can also create some of them yourself. Okay. So is there any question?
No
Any
question.
question?
No
All
question.
right.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll do it on my own. So I'll listen to the video again. Then I'll try to particularize this on my own. So if I have any question, that'll be the next class.
All right. All right. That's awesome. All right.